Hi, Hamid.
Hello, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
There's Christy.
Hello.
Hello, good to see you.
Greg, wherever you are, that's where I want to be.
Yeah, I'm there. As soon as the meeting's over, I'm just gonna kick my sandals off and lay down on the beach.
Hey, Christy. Hello, Tim.
Hey, Dawn.
Hi, Don.
There's General Manager. Put on put on a tie. We're not
Thank you
impressed.
for noticing. I'm trying. And Don put on a jacket. We're trying.
Yeah, jacket. Yeah, that's great. Well, it's 6 o'clock. We're ready to roll. You have everybody on? Jane, Jay, Greg, Terry, Ahmed, Don, Bill, Tim. I haven't seen Tim yet, but I know he's here. Megan. There's Dave. Okay, we're going to start it up. Are we ready to roll here, Hamid? Yes?
Ahmed, you're on mute. There you go.
Yes, should be fine. And Christy is the host right now, so we should be good.
Okay. Oh, Christy, give me a sign.
Anytime you're ready.
Okay, we're going to convene the regular meeting of the Bear Valley Community Services District for July 9th, 2020. Convening the regular meeting. To begin, we're going to go over some of the rules for this remote meeting. We will conduct the meeting using the following procedure. I will introduce the agenda item. A staff member will present the item, then call on board members by name for questions and comments. After the board has discussed the item, I will turn it over to the secretary for public comments. Members of the public should use the raise hand feature if they wish to comment on the agenda item. You will be called on in order and allowed 3 minutes to comment. To keep order, each member of the public will be limited to 1 comment per agenda item with no back and forth questions and answers, unless under very special circumstances. I will then call for a motion and a second as needed. I'll call on the board for any further discussion, and the secretary will then call the roll. First item is summary of actions taken during the closed session. Mr. Davis, please report.
Thank you, Vice President Quinn. The board did meet in closed session to discuss the 2 items listed on the agenda. There is no reportable action tonight.
Thank you. Krista, would you please bring up the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance?
That sharing?
There it is.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Item 7 is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion by Jane. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Greg. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Barron?
Present.
Director Carlin?
You drop out.
Okay.
He's muted.
Oh.
Gotcha. Aye. Here. There we go.
Okay.
Did you vote aye? Director Hahn?
Aye.
Vice President Quinn?
I vote aye. Thank you. Motion carries. Next item will be public comments on non-agenda items. Christy, please read the wording.
The public may address the board on matters not listed on this agenda. The board cannot take action on any item that is not on the agenda. The board or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed, or may ask questions for clarification. These items may also be referred to staff or scheduled on a future agenda. There will be a separate opportunity for public comment for each item on the agenda. At this time, Vice President Quinn, I have one hand raised, Heather Folks.
Hi, actually, I guess it signed me in on my daughter-in-law's account instead of my other 3 accounts. My name is Janet Folks.
Okay.
I thought so, Janet. Go ahead.
We submitted a 1-page back and front document from the Lake Quality Advisory Committee, and I think it was probably a lot of information for you to consume, although I think for Jane Barron and for Terry Quinn, maybe not so much, having been on the 2012 LQAC committee. We have met with Bill and with Dan and Jason and Will, and we are planning on meeting more in the future in order to really collaborate together, solve some issues that we have had ongoing, as Jane and Terry well know, since 2012, and looking at the lake quality. And so I want you to know that we've done over 400,000 data points. We have a lot of data, a lot of research. We've read the old evaluation of surface water impoundment projects from '99 and the 2011 water quality study. And we have spoken with the U.S. Department of Ag and several lake management committees. And we're really excited to collaborate with CSD. We also have some funds that we can make available during this collaboration in order to just correct some of the issues that might make all of the water in the valley higher quality. I want to give you my phone number, which I'll give to Christy, and my email. And if you have any questions on this data or anything that you would like to talk with us about, we'd be glad to talk to you. But meanwhile, it looks like we probably have a meeting set up to begin the collaboration on Tuesday, July the 14th. And I just can't tell you how excited we are to work together because of the really integrated issues that involve all of the watershed in the valley. Thanks.
Thank you, Janet.
Okay, the next hand up is Jiva.
Hello,
ahead.
thank you. At the last board meeting, I wrote a letter that you had read for me. Thank you, Christy. And I never got any official answers because I know this is a time when you're just listening to things not on the agenda. So I'd like to know if I'm going to get that official answer to like 4 questions. And I'd like to know if, Christy, you'd be able to say how many people attended, via Zoom at the end of the meeting before the closure. And is Megan Clark attending this meeting also? And if you had gotten any results regarding legal and the questions that you were going to address regarding the ethics and whether there's a conflict of interest regarding some board member having more representation over condos than just each board member having a representation of one property. So those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva.
You're welcome.
Anybody else, Christy?
Eleonora Hicks. Oops. Go ahead.
I'm actually good. This is Fred Hicks, actually. I'm good that there were no questions regarding what I need to comment on posed to Janet.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Okay. No more hands.
No more hands. Okay. Thank you, public. Appreciate your input. Okay, the next item is the consent calendar. Christy, please.
Consent items are considered routine and are intended to be acted upon in one motion without discussion. During this portion of the meeting, the consent calendar will be read aloud. Prior to approval, the president will give the board, staff, and public the opportunity to pull any item for discussion. The remaining calendar will be acted upon. Any pulled items will then be heard and acted upon individually. A, approve minutes of the June 11th, 2020 regular board meeting. B, approve minutes of the June 5th, 2020 special board meeting. C, approve minutes of the June 26th, 2020 special board meeting. D, approve June 2020 committee report. E, accept the register of warrants for June 2020.
Thank you, Christy. Are there any board comments or does anyone wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Jane?
No.
No? I'm seeing all no's. Okay. From the public, anyone want to pull an item for discussion?
You have no hands?
Hearing none? Okay. So we need a motion to approve the
Vice
consent
President, I
calendar
move
as
to
presented.
approve the consent calendar, items A through E.
That was
Second.
Greg. Motion by Greg, second by Jane. Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn,
Aye. And the motion carries unanimously. Item 10, disclosures by the Board of Directors. Christie?
board members are asked to disclose any outside communications with individuals and organizations that have an action item on this agenda that pertains directly to them or their specific personal or private interests, and which communication is not included or disclosed in the agenda package, so that all interested persons have an equal opportunity to express and represent their interests.
Okay. Jay, do you have any items?
I don't.
And Jane?
I have none.
And Greg?
No, sir, no items.
And I have nothing to disclose. Item 11, action items. Am I supposed to read the asterisk to opening there, Christie? Do you know?
No, you don't need to do that.
Okay, all right. Okay, first item is adopt resolution 20/21-01 to collect delinquent accounts for water, sewer, and refuse services via tax roll. Public hearing item. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Vice President Quinn. At the June 11th board meeting, staff presented a list of delinquent utility accounts, and the board approved the initial list and set the public hearing for today, July 9th. Since that initial list was prepared all the way until the staff report was prepared, we had 2 property owners that did pay and brought the outstanding amount on the list to $12,441.45. Up until now, we did receive an additional payment for account MAR 0121 in the amount of $564.57. So the final list being presented for approval and for the public hearing consists of 15 parcels totaling $11,876.88. After the close of the public hearing and adoption of the resolution, the final report will be filed with the Kern County Auditor, and it will become part of the property taxes for the upcoming year. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Ahmed. Any questions from the board?
No questions.
Seeing none, we will open the public hearing. Any comments from the public?
We have none.
We have no comments from the public. We will therefore close the public hearing and entertain a motion on this item.
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 20/21-01, accepting the final delinquent utility account report and approving collection of delinquent accounts for water, sewer, and refuse services via the tax roll.
Second.
Motion by Jane, second by, was that Jay?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion from the board, staff, or public?
No.
Hearing none. Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn,
Aye. The motion carries unanimously. Item B sub I, FY 2020-21 tax roll items. Item I is adopt resolution 20/21-02, setting the special tax for gate operations for fiscal year 2020/21 at $75 per parcel. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Vice President Quinn. Resolutions 2021-02 through 2021-07 set special taxes, assessments, and standby charges for this current fiscal year 2021. The amount of the special tax for gate remains at not to exceed $75 per parcel. The special tax for police protection services remains at not to exceed $80 per parcel. The roads assessment for the roads fund still remains at an assessment of $340 per parcel. For improvement district number 2, these are bonds of the water enterprise fund. The tax rate was calculated at 0.001-93787 per the assessed value of property for the upcoming fiscal year. The water standby charges remain set at $40.28 on unimproved parcels. And then the sewer standby charge remains at $59.96 on unimproved parcels. Upon approval of these resolutions, the resolutions will be sent to the Kern County Auditor and would become a part of the property tax bills for fiscal year 2021. And I'm available for any questions.
Hearing none. Public comments?
There are none.
Very good. Then we need a motion, please. Beginning with item I.
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021 setting the special tax for gate operations for year 2021 at $75 per parcel.
Second.
Motion by Jay, second by Jane. Further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn.
Aye. Item II. May we have a motion, please?
I move the board.
Move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 20-21-03 setting the special tax for police protection services for full year 2021 at $80 per parcel.
Second.
Motion by Jay, second by Jane. Further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn.
Aye. Item III. May we have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021-04 setting the road assessment for full year 2021 at $340 per parcel.
Second.
Motion by Jay, second by Jane. Just notation, I believe the FY is not full year, but fiscal year. We have a motion and a second. Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn.
Aye. Item IV. Motion, please.
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021-05 setting the tax rate for Improvement District Number 2 bonds for fiscal year 2020-21 at 0.0019378% per $1,000 assessed value of property.
Second.
Motion by Jay, second by Jane. Any further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn.
Aye, motion carries. Item V. Motion, please.
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021-06 setting water standby charges for fiscal year 2020-21 at $40.28.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Jay, second by Greg. Any further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Oops, sorry, I lost my screen share. 1 second.
You did.
Are we back?
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry, Director Barron, Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn,
Aye. Motion carries. Item VI, motion please.
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021-07, setting the sewer standby charges for fiscal year 2020-21 at $59.96.
Second.
Motion by Jay, second by Greg. Any further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn,
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is item C, adopt resolution 20/21-08, approving a debt management policy. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Vice President Quinn. In September 2016, Senate Bill number 1029 was enacted, and that amended Government Code Section 8855. That amendment required that local government agencies adopt a debt management policy prior to issuing any further debt. And so with the proposed item further on the agenda to finance the acquisition of generators, the district is required to adopt a debt management policy prior to issuing that debt. So resolution 2021-08 will adopt the debt management policy and satisfy the requirements of Government Code Section 8855. And staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Hamid. Board comments or questions? Jane?
I'm assuming legal has seen and approved this.
Yes, I did.
Good.
Jay?
No comments.
Greg?
None, thank you.
And I have none. Public comments? Anything, Christie?
there are none.
There are none. Thank you.
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 2021-08, adopting the debt management policy.
Second.
Motion by Greg, second by Jane. Any further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Barron, Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn,
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item D, adopt resolution 20/21-09, authorizing the execution and delivery of an installment sale agreement and authorizing and directing certain actions in connection with the acquisition of generators. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Vice President Quinn. The district reached out to the Municipal Finance Corporation for assistance with financing the acquisition of generators. The district is looking to acquire 5 portable and 2 stationary generators to be used by the Water Division during the PSPS shutoff events. This resolution would authorize the execution and delivery of an installment sale agreement, as well as any of the other related documents to the financing. The cost of the generators is $466,241, so that would be the principal amount borrowed. The interest rate is not to exceed 3.25%. And so overall, over the 5 years, the district would pay $46,000 in interest payments and a total debt service amount of $512,668. These payments would be 5 equal annual installments of just over $102,000 per year. With that, staff is available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Howard.
Mr. President,
If I could, just wanted to raise one point. These documents came a little bit late from Municipal Finance Corporation, so I did not have a chance to fully read them until this week. Hamid and I have some questions and some minor changes to be made to the agreements. Nothing particularly substantive, but just if the board does proceed with this action, we would request that the recommended motion include subject to approval to form by General Counsel, so I can go back to Municipal Corporation and make some edits.
Okay, thank you, Don. Any board comments? Any public comments?
There are none.
None? I'll entertain a motion.
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 20/21-09, authorizing the execution and delivery of an installment sale agreement, and authorizing and directing certain actions in connection with the acquisition of generators, subject to approval by General Counsel.
Second.
Motion by Jane, second by who?
Jay,
Okay.
Very good. Any further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
aye.
Vice President Quinn.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item is item E, authorized professional services agreement with Davy Resource Group to provide registered professional forester services for the CAL FIRE Fuel Reduction Grant Program. Mr. Mallonan, General Manager.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board, this is the second step in our implementation of the grant that we were approved for over $1 million for fuel reduction up on the top elevations of Bear Mountain. So unfortunately, we had worked with Jeff Gletney throughout the grant writing process. He had done a number of grants successfully here to remove some timber as a member of the Kern County Fire Department, but he is now on the side of the state of California and can no longer consult with us. We had hoped and envisioned he would be the forester as we move through this, but he cannot be. And so we have worked with him, talked with him, the foresters, and particularly Tim Moran, Davy Resource Group is highly recommended by Jeff. And so we've worked to try to develop the scope of work that will address all the needs that we have to implement and oversee this. It is a not to exceed $45,000 over the course of the grant. That's $40,000 plus $5,000 for CEQA related kinds of work. All of that's in the scope that's attached to the agenda packet for your information. And our recommendation is to move forward to authorize execution of the agreement as presented.
Very good. Thank you, Bill. Questions from the board, please. Yep. Questions or comments from the public?
We have one. Jiva.
Yes, thank you, Bill, for that work. Could you just expand for a moment if you've been able to work towards the logger? Last time, I think you mentioned that there's two different ways you could do it. One would you have to go out for bids and another you wouldn't have to. Could you expand on that?
Yes, Mr. Vice President, if I may.
Sure.
So relative to this professional services, we didn't go out to bid and it is not necessary. We do intend and anticipate going out to bid for the logging firm. These are public funds and a lot of them. And so we're going to work with the forester in developing the plans and all of that to be able to then put into a request for proposals or bids to do the work. So, you know, the point between a proposal and a bid is probably resting a little bit within the definition of the project. And I defer to General Counsel to answer the question. I don't know that it falls under the definition of a public works project, so it may not require bidding, but as we've talked internally at a staff level, we envision putting it out to bids anyway.
Right, and if you, in response to the question, if Christy can scroll up to the scope of work on the first page, working, you'll see as General Manager Mallonan indicated that one of the tasks right there in the middle is to assist in prepare. Well, first of all, we're probably going to prepare what's called a request for qualification of here logger, or the technical term is licensed timber operator. They're special qualifications. This is not tree service people. It's something very different. So we would prepare an RFQ so we can evaluate people who are qualified. And then because this is not going to be one individual project all done at once, but there are multiple different parcels because a lot of it's on private land, we could envision multiple loggers bidding on this and being awarded different bids here. But we do intend at the moment to pursue a low bid approach, but with a qualified group of contractors.
Sure. Of course. Very good. Questions from the board? No? Questions from the public?
No
Call
more.
for a motion.
I move the Board of Directors authorize the General Manager to execute a professional services agreement with Davy Resource Group to provide registered professional forester services for the CAL FIRE Fuel Reduction Grant Program in a form satisfactory to the General Counsel and in an amount not to exceed $45,000.
Second.
Motion by Greg, second by Jane. Further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Director Barron?
Aye. Aye.
Byron?
Aye.
Director Hahn?
Aye.
Vice President Quinn?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Item F, authorize the general manager to execute a construction contract in the amount not to exceed $152,616.80 with the apparent lowest responsible bidder, Alcorn Fence Company, for the guardrail improvement project. Mr. Van Wagener.
Thank you, Vice President Quinn, members of the board. As you may recall, we have a multi-year program for replacing various guardrails throughout the district. This is the second year of that program. We have 60 locations across the district. 4 were replaced last year as part of this 3-year improvement program. We have 11 sites that we were looking to do this year to bring our guardrail up to more current standards. We have reviewed this project in accordance with CEQA and was determined to be categorically exempt under Class 2, which is replacement of existing structures, because the project involves a replacement of existing guardrails in the same location. The guardrail project was set out to competitive bidding. We received 2 complete proposals, one from Alcorn Fence and one from C&W Construction Specialties. And Alcorn Fence Company is the parent low bidder at $152,616.80. And I stand for any questions you may have.
Okay, board. Jay? No? Jane?
No.
Greg?
Looks like we're $2,600 over the budgeted line item. Will that come from the roads fund or general fund?
Mr. Vice President, that I anticipate that from the road fund, and it would be a function of managing that budget to free that money up.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. I have an observation and or a question. When we did this last year, the question remains, we're bringing our guardrails in the valley up to current standards. Do they all need, how many of them could be grandfathered in order to save some money? Driving to town yesterday, there are a number of guardrails on 202 that are not up to this standard, and that's state highway. So do we have to jump out in front of the state or the code or something? Just it's just a matter of making sure that we are up to standard if somebody happens to plow off one of the unimproved guardrails. I guess that's really my question.
And that's certainly one of the considerations, Vice President Quinn. There are several others that they look at as they're doing the conditional assessments of these. So one of them is, as far as the standards go, are they the right height, which is now at 28 inches? And we have some that are very low, which research has shown, since they were put in the 70s, that wouldn't necessarily be adequate in stopping a vehicle because they're so low to the ground. And so those, in that case, that standard would be to raise it up, to bring it up. The other conditional assessment they do is because of the age of these, which are, 40 plus years, some of them have some structural integrity issues with the posts, with the guardrail posts that are in the ground and have been in the ground for 40 years. Others didn't fare as badly, and that's why they have that priority list. So there are some that of the older standard that I've looked at just to kind of verify kind of what our engineering firm kind of proposed or presented. And structurally, they look good, and that's why they're at the bottom of the replacement list. They can last a little bit longer. So I think that's maybe the same approach that other municipalities and counties, and maybe even the state is using to kind of prioritize those locations. And why you're still seeing a lot of them around there, because they're structurally able to protect, and it's just one of those works in progress to kind of work through those standards.
I looked at the state standard. This is called what? The Midwest Guardrail something or another? And,
yeah, specification.
I took some loading on my computer to get all those pages up. Yeah, but I forgot to look and see how old is this current standard? Is this fairly recent? Is the last 10 years more?
The Midwest, the one that's currently...
Yeah, the one we're trying to meet now.
That's a good question. I would say, based upon what I can remember in dealing with this, it's at least 20 or 25 years that there hasn't been any major improvements. Probably 20 or changes to that. So they've the technology and the research has gotten us to this point in the specification and the standards.
Okay, all right. Anything further from the board?
I do have a comment, Terry.
Sure. Go ahead.
If I might.
Yeah.
So I am in total opposition of your comments, Terry. I think the guardrails and the safety of our public is at high. If we don't recall, I'll just refresh everybody's memory. We actually had somebody go off the side. We have had many people go off the side of the cliffs. We are in a mountain community, and if we didn't have guardrails or the correct guardrails, we probably would have killed somebody on Jacaranda. And any way that we could actually protect the public, that should be in high consideration, especially in the conditions that we're at here. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you.
I
I recognize that there are, did you want to say something, Jane?
Yes, I have a question.
Go.
Yeah. David, if this is a 3-year replacement program and we did 4 in the first year and 11 this year, it leaves 45 for the 3rd year?
45 locations. Well, and thank you for that question. It was my understanding and I wasn't here when the 3-year program was kind of given the green light. I think at that time, we might not have known the extent of the repairs. And so as you can see, last year we only got 4 locations done. Well, that's because one of them was Cumberland Hill, that was 1,000 linear feet. It took up almost the entire budget amount, and we're able to get a lot more done this year because they're smaller, less linear feet and those kind of things. So I think what we've talked about internally is that after this year, we will look at what we've got left of those 45 locations, what those priorities are, how they're ranked as far as moderate or minimal, whatever, and then just kind of go from there. We have 1 more year that we could do this of the 3 years, and then we can kind of look and see where we're at from there. As kind of Terry brought up, that there are some that may not be in that bad a condition and are sound, and we could determine at that point, do we do this for another couple of years and just get them all done, or how do we approach that?
And budget-wise for the 3 years, how are we standing?
Last year, I think was right around 115,000. And of course, this year's the 152. If that's
Yeah.
what you're asking. Okay, yeah.
And
We're anticipating the 150 for the next fiscal year, which would be 21-22.
third year, 150. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Public comments.
We have, I believe it's Fred Hicks.
That's correct. It's Fred Hicks. I have a quick question regarding the budget side of it. If you have $150,000 allocated for next fiscal year and you have 45 sites, you're averaging like 10,000 a site for this year. That means you're going to be about 30 sites short of your actual budget, going back to Jane's question. And I kind of agree with Jay Carlin. We should do whatever we can to keep the community safe. So I think we need to figure out, how do we make that work? And I realize that this was put into place prior to both you and Bill arriving in the CSD. So I'm not sure how that can be looked at, but it just seems like you're going to have a budget shortfall within the 3 years.
Mr. Vice President, if I might. And excellent observation. I think it's obvious we're not going to be able to get it all done in 3 years. I think the plan or intent as the board and staff had moved forward was to do that, but here we are with the real prices. And I think it's a matter of just continuing to budget and to try to get them done. So if I were to do that quick math, we have 3 more years ahead to knock out the backlog that we seem to have. And so again, it gets down to managing the budget and being able to allocate funds to those capital projects.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
So, Bill, so you see this as a 5-year project rather than a 3-year project?
Yes, Director Barron, that appears to be the way it's going to flush out, with real prices having gone out and finished the report, which it may have been anticipated less were needed to be done than the report showed or something. But yes, that'd be my reaction at this point, is it's going to take us 3 years longer than we probably figured.
Okay, thank you.
These things are always a moving target. We know that. Very good. I will then call for a motion, please.
Okay, I move that the Board of Directors authorize the General Manager to execute a construction contract in the amount not to exceed $152,616.80 with the apparent lowest responsible bidder, Alcorn Fence Company, for the guardrail improvement project.
Second.
Motion by Jane, second by Jay. Any further discussion? Christie, please call the roll.
Christie, I don't know if I'm muted or unmuted. I've raised my hand. Can you guys hear me? This is Fred.
Oh, okay. Did you want to allow?
Yeah, quickly, I just want to clarify the question Jane actually posed to Bill and Bill posed back. Given the current budgeting for approximate what site you have, this should be a 5-year project, not a 6.
What I said.
Because next year is 150,000, which leaves 300,000 remaining out of your 40. You have 30 sites with 300,000 remaining. If you do 150,000 a year, you're looking at a 5-year project, not a 6.
I think we said 5.
You said 5, Bill said 6.
Well, I think that will be dealt with once we see what next year's requirements are and what the prices are at that time. The economy is being flooded with money right now, so it may be that prices will be going up. Who knows? Anyway, we have a motion, we have a second. Christie, call the roll, please.
Director Barron?
Aye.
Director Carlin?
Aye.
Director Hahn?
Aye.
Vice President Quinn?
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item is Item G, authorize general manager to execute a construction contract with Granite Construction Company in the amount not to exceed $600,000 for the gate drainage improvement project. Dave Van Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. This item speaks to the gate drainage project that we've been working to move along for several years now. Just to give a little bit of background, we have tried a couple of different times to bid this out. Well, we did bid it out, and we didn't get any bidders. We then went to a construction company to kind of work with them on seeing if maybe we could get them to take on this project. And last year we worked with WM Lyles, and they spent several months putting together an estimate, a project estimate or bid, and then presented that to us. We just felt like it was too much money. If you remember, it was in excess of $650,000, just right around there. So we bid it out again at the first of the year. Same thing. We had no bidders. Then we went to Granite Construction. I've been going to talk with one of their lead estimators, and we began working together. We met on site several times, talked about the scope of the project. He took it to his estimators, and we got that back just a few weeks ago. And that's the bid or the quotation that we have in our possession at this time. Now, just a couple of related items. First and foremost, talking about CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, we've reviewed this project and determined it to be categorically exempt because there again, the project involves repairs to existing district facilities, and also the project involves the replacement of existing drainage structures in the same location, and it involves grading on land with a slope of less than 10%, and other minor trenching and backfilling. So we're categorically exempt and no additional environmental review is necessary. This project has several components to it. One is the open riprap channel up next to the private drive on Buttercup that will drain into a 72-inch drop inlet and then go into a pipe, a 48-inch CMP pipe that'll go across Buttercup and empty into the open channel that runs down along the police department property. One of the things this will do is mitigate the overflow and the washing out of this private drive, because I think at the time, well, it's still probably there, the homeowner there has maybe a 4 or a 6-inch line underneath his driveway, and so that it just obviously wasn't adequate. We have another 48-inch on the other side of his driveway, but this will be able to carry all that drainage down underneath Buttercup and into that open channel that runs down along the police department. And then that's the second phase, is that open channel needs to be regraded and the riprap repositioned for better functionality. Another part of this project had to do with the 4 24-inch culverts that are under the side access road to the police department that the original engineering specifications called to be replaced with 1 48-inch pipe, so that all the pipes that conveyed this runoff were 48-inch pipes. And then the last component was the crossing under Bear Valley Road right near the gate, that 48-inch CMP, and then drain out into the drainage channel to the south of Bear Valley Road. Now, this project also includes one other thing that the project didn't include with WM Lyles, which, so if we were to compare apples to apples as far as the scope of the original project, Granite came in at $488,025, which is quite a bit different than this roughly $650,000 that WM Lyles came up with. Now, the total, as you see it, is $574,930, and that's with the addition of about $87,000 in paving and milling. And this we thought was necessary as we're looking to hold off on other improvements around that gate area and the gatehouse area that we thought we really did need to address the pavement, the lanes in that area. So from about Buttercup, where the 2017 overlay stopped on Bear Valley Road, out to the crest of the hill just outside the gate, we're proposing that whole thing be milled and overlaid so that we can fix the in and out lanes that are in sore need of repair. There's a couple of things to kind of be aware of that would be additional costs or considerations. And one of them is that if there's any current landscaping or irrigation sprinkler systems in this area, they would have to be torn out, removed, and then reinstalled after the project is complete. I've met with IMG and our facilities people, and there's irrigation in there, but it looks like it's been discontinued and is not live anymore. We're finalizing that. Brandon from IGM is checking on that, but he's pretty sure it's of no consequence. So that one we've pretty much settled. There's a small section of curb and gutter and down drain coming out of the police department parking lot on the inside of the gate, and then a down drain that drops down into that culvert that goes under Bear Valley Road. That would have to be replaced. That's not in the contract. We could do that in-house for maybe $1,500 at the most. It's a pretty small job. We would also need to, I'd recommend that we hire a subcontract out a project inspector to inspect the work. I mean, I could technically do it, but I would feel a lot better for me, but also for the district if we had somebody that had their credentials that could inspect their work and make sure the plans were being followed, the methods were right, and all those kind of things that can document that whole thing throughout this project. So that's something that we'd need to pursue. And once the milling and the paving is done, then there'd have to be striping, which would be minimal. I can't imagine, and I'm getting some quotes on that right now, but it'd be more than $1,500, $2,000. But I can verify that and find that out as soon as I can get some feedback from some of these striping companies. With that said, one thing else that I want to make very clear that as we worked with these contractors, both WM Lyles, and talked about the scope and some design components of this project, and also Granite Construction, there were a couple things that we thought we could do that could save us some money that we really wondered about why they were in the design. And some of their project engineers at Granite and WM Lyles for that matter spoke to these things. So in talking to Kevin Parsons at Granite, he brought up the same things, and that is the 4 24-inch pipes that go under the back entrance to the police department are in really good shape. And there's really, we don't see really any need to replace that. And we could save some money by leaving those in there. Capacity wise, those 4 24-inch pipes have the same capacity at least as one 48-inch. What we would need to do there is install a head wall, which there is not one now. Another thing that we could remove is, for whatever reason, in the original design, there were tail walls, for lack of a better term. I don't know what they call them out in California, but basically on the downhill side of a pipe, the outfall, they had designed tail walls, or just like a head wall, concrete tail wall, and we're really not sure why they were in there. A head wall, of course, is for erosion and to kind of control the flow. But on the downhill, on the outfall side, we don't see any reason why we can't have a flared pipe end to convey the water away from the pipe and continue it on down the channel, which could save us significantly in our costs with those things. So those are a couple of changes that we could make that could really help. And then the other thing, because I wasn't involved in the details of the paving and the milling of the 2 inbound and the 1 outbound lane in that area, I think we could really save some money on the milling, because for one thing, it looks to me like they're proposing that we do a 2-inch mill across this whole area, all 3 lanes from start to finish. And I wouldn't recommend that. I think you give up some structural strength when you remove a lot of that, surface. I think what we can do, if any milling at all, is we do the butt joints, which is where we would start paving and where we would stop paving and tie into the older sections. And then maybe if there's some drainage issues where we need to do some milling along some curb and gutter, then maybe there's a little bit of milling there, but it wouldn't be more than a couple of feet to maintain our cross slope or whatever it might be. But I can look at that and we can really dial that in. And that's almost $71,000 that I'm sure I can cut at least in half by not having to mill that whole thing. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of those things, and we're still working on getting these costs down as we move forward. Kevin at Granite was confident we could also do that. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about the fiscal impact. The current budget amount we have is $365,000. The total amount of the Great Drainage Improvement Project is not to exceed $600,000, but it will require an amendment to the budget of an additional $235,000. And rather than decrease the fund of the roads fund from an already low $323,000 to $88,000, we're proposing a transfer from the general fund to the roads fund of $235,000, which would in essence decrease the fund balance of the general fund from 2.8 million to 2.5 million, but remain well above the general fund's contingency reserve requirement of the 1.5 million. And with that, I stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Ward, questions?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes, on their on their exclusions, they're not going to prepare the stormwater prevention plan. So are we doing that? And that's my first question.
Thanks for bringing that up, Jane. We actually talked about that, and they said they could put one together if we needed, and we've still got to decide if we want them to do that, and it would be an additional charge, and it shouldn't be much, or if we're going to go and find that and put that together. So yeah, that we do need to finalize that. Thank you for that.
And they're not liable for reconstruction of any improvements demolished during construction?
Yeah, and basically what they're talking about there is specifically that curb and gutter, especially right there at the main gate, at that crossing of the pipe underneath Bear Valley Road.
Okay, and they're going to do no testing, engineering, surveying, and I'm just floored that they're not doing construction staking. I mean, that Granite does that all the time.
Yeah, and I mentioned that to Kevin, and I don't know if they were just trying to keep that down, the cost down, and they wanted to maybe see if we would take that on or not, but I really want him to pursue that as well, and he knows that. So to me, that was rather odd too, that they weren't even going to consider that. But I think there again, it was so they could try and keep costs down for us as low as possible, but we're going to have to end up doing it anyway.
Yeah, so
we're gonna address that as well.
And the utility relocation and adjustment?
Yeah, the only thing that would be, other than maybe the water line, and I've talked to Will, and he's gonna pothole that to make sure, but he's fairly confident it's underneath the zone or the construction area that they're going to be working. It's deeper than what they're going to need to be working. But that's the only relocation or utility that we would really need to worry about.
Oh, we're going to abandon it. Is that what you're saying?
No, this one here actually feeds some things that it feeds the landscaping, and I think it feeds the police department too. The one to well 25 we're abandoning, but that's a different one from what Will has explained to me.
So, yeah. And in the Granite's documents, they discuss both corrugated steel and corrugated metal. And what difference do they make between those two?
I couldn't see any, and from talking to them, they use that term interchangeably. It's the corrugated metal. It's the
steel galvanized, right?
Yes. So I'm not sure why they're using that term interchangeably because it could raise a question of which is it, but it's the galvanized corrugated metal pipe.
Okay, would you ask them to clarify that?
You betcha.
Okay, and that's all I had. Besides an estimate for how much you think we're going to exceed the 574,000.
Okay. Okay. Remainder of the board, Jay, Greg, anything?
I do have a couple of questions. This has been a long time, Dave, so thank you for finally getting it on our plate. Is any of this drainage going to directly affect the gatehouse itself?
I'm sorry, you dropped out there. Affect the gatehouse what?
Are we going to have the statue of the gatehouse right now as it stands?
If you're talking about
So
where we're going under the road, if it's going to disturb any of that or get into,
Yes. Yeah.
no, it shouldn't.
Okay.
The only thing that they'll have to do that's close to the gatehouse is we'll have to remove all those sand barriers we just put in there and get those out of the way for them to go across the road. And then they'll do that. That's part of their scope. And then they'll put them back in to specifications when they're done.
Okay. No, I'm good. Thank you, David.
You bet. Thank you, Jay. Greg, anything?
Yeah, Dave, the 4 24-inch pipes that we may be able to leave in place, are those under Butterfield or under Bear Valley Road? I think under Butterfield.
Neither. They're under that back or that side entrance to the police department that goes to the back lot, that little access road off of Buttercup into the police department lot.
And we won't know for sure until because somebody's gonna have to look at that and an engineer probably would have to decide whether we can leave that or not, right?
Well, a couple engineers already have, but what we probably need, and I need to talk to Dawn about this, but what we probably need, what we need is an engineer to stamp that change, that yes, this will work, so that we have that protection, we have that knowledge that we can leave those 424s in there and it's the same, if not more capacity than 148. And that's a change in the original engineer's drawings and specifications. So yeah, we would want to make sure an engineer stamped that.
So if the engineer won't stamp it and says, no, you really should put a 72 under this as well, then we're going to exceed our $570,000 there, or is this included?
As it stands now, it's a 48 that's going to go in there for this cost. We're trying to save some money by leaving the 24s in there. So it won't be any more if we leave it at the 48.
Okay. So we talked about several things that could lower or raise the cost of this project. We're still under the $570,000 number.
We're under the 600. This isn't, the proposal is that it's not to exceed the 600,000. And so from the 574 to the 600,000 is where we're going to have the extra engineering costs, the extra inspection or surveying or the SWIP plan, those things.
Okay, thank you for that. And my final comment, Mr. Vice President, is I consider this transfer from the general fund quite an appropriate use of general fund monies in contrast to the sewer rate where not everyone would benefit. So this one, everyone will benefit, and the people who have been here more than about 3 years will remember the big flood that closed the gate with a mudslide, and this is all to mitigate that. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Right, thank you, Greg. Christy, any public comments?
Sorry, yes, we have one. Fred.
Well, thank you. I would like to also agree with Director Hahn on the fact that I feel this is a very appropriate use of general funds. I think this affects everybody in the valley and it's a great use of it. My question is for Bill and Hamed. Will you be adjusting the sewer rate study 2 or proposal 2 with the reduced general funds that are going to result from this transfer?
Mr. Vice President?
Yes.
As it stands, this use of general fund has no bearing on the option 2 concept of use of general funds. They're independent actions.
Correct, but the basis of how you got to your what the general reserve funds are going to be in option 2 were based on a total amount in the general funds. You've now reduced that general fund amount by $235,000. So that's actually going to reduce your projected totals for the general fund moving into 2021, 2022, 2023.
Sure. And it's an excellent observation. We had a chance to talk about this early on, I think, Fred, that part of the oversight of that general fund has to take into account futures. So you're correct in the respect that it will change those projections. I don't believe we've run those projections to see what it does to the general fund if in fact there's a subsequent transfer for the sewers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further comments from the board or the public, may we have a motion?
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Dave, how confident are you that we can come in under 600K?
Pretty confident. Some of the cost savings we can do on some of these areas, I'm pretty confident we can come in under 600.
Thank you. That's it.
I have one more comment, Terry, if I could, please.
Of course.
Dave, you mentioned a couple of these side, like striping and whatever, small little projects that we could do for $1,500 to $2,500 a piece. I think there was 3 or 4 of them that you mentioned. Why don't we try to negotiate that into the final with Granite so we don't have to deal with it?
I certainly could, Director Carlin, and I can ask them about that and what their costs would be, and we can kind of compare. Obviously, the small project that we would be doing, the impact, if we're doing that, not able to do other things, although it's really only going to be about a half, maybe 4 to 6 hour job for the concrete and the down drain. We've already priced that out. But yeah, I can totally ask them to just include it all and see where we're at with that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure they're going to nickel and dime you for $6,000 to $8,000 or $10,000 on a $600,000 project. Just my comments.
You bet. Okay, I'll run that down for sure. You bet.
Okay. Still need a motion, please.
I move the Board of Directors authorize the execution of a construction contract for the Gate Drainage Improvement Project with Granite Construction Company in the amount not to exceed $600,000.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Jane, second by Greg. Any further discussion? Christy, please call the roll.
Director Barron?
Aye.
Director Carlin?
Aye.
Director Hahn?
Aye.
Vice President Quinn?
Aye, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item is item H, accept the monthly investment report as of May 30th, 2020. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Vice President Quinn. The monthly investment report for May 2020 shows a balance of in its investment accounts of $7,379,000, and in its operating accounts $390,267. Overall, for the district's pooled cash, that's $7,769,000. From April 30th, that's an increase of $586,000. And that's primarily a result of the district receiving property taxes in May that it would have received in April in prior years. But due to the property tax deadline being extended to May, the county remitted collections to us. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Anything from the board? Anything from the public?
There are none.
Very good. We need a motion to accept, I believe.
I move the Board of Directors accept the monthly investment report as of May 31st, 2020.
Second.
I'll second.
Oh, I
Motion
tried to
by-
second, sorry. it might not come through.
Seconded.
Say again?
Director Hahn seconded.
Oh, he did. Very good. I didn't hear. Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion. Christie, call the roll, please.
Director Barron,
Aye.
Director Carlin,
Aye.
Director Hahn,
Aye.
Vice President Quinn.
Aye, and motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 12A, District Personnel Policy Manual. Mr. Mallon.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board, as you know from your involvement on the board as well as our committees, we've been working on the update to our personnel handbook for well over a year. And for everyone's understanding, that starts with somewhat of a template of an existing set of policies that we then run through HR for a little bit more customizing to what is Bear Valley CSD. We get feedback from management, we get feedback from the staff, we take it to the admin committee, and then it's been coming to the board, and you have been, over the course of the last year, approving as to form on all of these policies. And we are now really at the final end of this, where the General Counsel's office has reviewed. We're getting ready to present it to the board for its final adoption. And we look to do that in September, please. We put this on now just so in the event there are any other questions as we're going through it that have come up for any of you for us to address or to have the board address. We thought this was an excellent opportunity to do it. We know we have some outstanding issues. A couple that come to mind are Director Carlin's question about accumulated leave. We also have an ongoing question about holiday pay. So those two immediately come to mind that will be, a topic for the board to make a decision about. But whether there were any beyond that is kind of our question for you.
Very good. Thank you, Bill. Questions or comments from the board, please?
Well, I would like to review the admin committee's comments, but were there any changes to or answers to questions that we posed in committee?
Most of those were addressed between the committee meeting and the meeting where the board would approve it as to form.
Okay, no, nothing substantive then.
No.
No, I don't believe so either.
Okay.
Any public comments?
There are none.
Very good.
Oh,
There
wait,
is one.
one popped up. Fiona.
Joanna,
Just unmuting myself. Can you hear me?
Ken.
Right. I just want to thank Bill and all the staff for doing this huge undertaking. I think it's really encouraging that the CSD's practices and their standards and procedures and so on are being modernized and brought up to date. I think that's very important. It may seem a small matter to a lot of people, but I think it's really important that we have proper, modern sophisticated working practices and conditions for our employees. And I know it's been a huge task, so I want to thank Bill and all the staff who've worked on that.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
Okay, this will be an action item for September's regular board meeting.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said yes, sir.
Yes, sir, yes. Next item is B, Community Cleanup Day. Dave Van Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. This just has to do with an opportunity we have on July 25th to provide the residents with a little bit more service as far as some of those items that they would be challenged to dispose of normally. And Waste Management is helping through their contract to do this. We have a couple of these a year. And in this case, from 8 to 2, we're going to be running these. We'll have 9 e-waste boxes, 3 50-yard roll-offs for bulky items, and then, you know, mattresses and things like that, and then a 30-yard roll-off just for scrap metal. And we'll have some additional staff on hand so that we can continue our transfer site operations, but also serve any of the public that might come and take advantage of this cleanup day. And with that said, the only fiscal impact might be a few hours for some staff members on site. And other than that, I stand for any questions you might have about it.
Okay, board. I guess for clarification, I'm blanking on what an e-waste box is. What is that?
It's electronic. It's like a computer monitor, a TV, you know, those kind of things that don't typically go in household bins.
Okay.
Electronic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then the bulky items could be refrigerators, as big as a refrigerator, or sofas and things like that. No real restriction as long as it's not hazardous, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, and one of the things I personally want to check in, because in my experience, this was an issue for landfills, is with anything with refrigerant, a refrigerator, an air conditioning unit, whatever, those had to have the refrigerant removed from them. And if the coils were still there, they had to be certified by an appliance maintenance person that they had removed the refrigerant. And then the landfill would take it and just landfill it on the wall. So I need to check with Tehachapi to make sure, to see how they are going to bring in some of this stuff, if they have to have those kind of tags or whatever. But
okay, it'll be an interesting answer, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have. Any comments from the public?
Yes, Fred.
Yeah, I have actually one question in regards to the cleanup day, but it's more in regards to the general dump as well. Non-treated wood, like you have a cut off 2x4 from your house, where is that supposed to go in the normal dump scheme of things? And then where would that go with this clean off day? I've been informed by the staff of the dump to just cut it up in a small enough portion and then put it in a black garbage bag and throw it in the bin. I don't feel that that's correct. I think there should be something for non-treated lumber that we deal with. And I was wondering if you guys could help me with that.
Mr. Vice President, if I may?
Sure.
So I'm not sure, Fred, what you mean by a non-treated two-by-four, because to us and to the industry, a non-treated two-by-four would be one that you basically cut out of a tree trunk and cut down into a two-by-four, because otherwise all lumber is treated. And that's where the landfill makes the distinction. Does that make sense?
Actually, to me, that doesn't make sense, because treated lumber is meant to go below grade or at grade, so it doesn't decompose. Non-treated lumber is meant to be above grade and used in like your normal household walls. So in a house, the bottom plate would be treated. The upper struts would be non-treated lumber, which are white wood essentially that comes straight out of the middle of a tree. So there is a difference when you're dealing with lumber between treated and non-treated. And it doesn't seem to be that our waste is actually making that distinction.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can clarify that. All we can do is go off of the permit that we received from the county based upon our operations here, and what the landfill will accept on the wall, or in the normal area that they'll bury this. So we'll see if we can make get some clarification out there for everybody.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it, because I have basically the same question, Fred. It seems kind of weird to me when you say treated. That sounds like there's some kind of a surface has been added, like varnish or paint or something like that, stain and so forth. But if it's just, even if it's just a piece of wood fence, like a dog-eared pieces of dog ear or something like that, that has never been treated with anything except it's cut and shaped. That seems like that's perfect for throwing in the ground, but I'd be appreciative of the answer on that. Okay. I think that's all. Thank you. Moving on. Item C, November 3rd, 2020 consolidated general election. Christie.
This is just a general informational FYI. I haven't received the official notification yet from the county, but declaration of candidacy forms will be available from July 13th through August 7th at the Kern County Clerk office in Bakersfield. They normally have other locations that are available some evenings and some weekends, but I haven't been notified quite yet of that. This is just more of a heads up, it's coming. We have 2 seats, 4-year offices seats for Director Barron and Director Carlin. If neither of those or either of those does not submit their declaration of candidacy by the deadline, which is August 7th, then the deadline is extended for 5 days for non-incumbents to file. So it would go to August 12th if that's the case. As I get more information and more official notifications, I'll be distributing, putting them on the website and sending them out to the board. And but the election is conducted by Kern County. It's not through the district here. It's consolidated with the general election in November. And that's all I have right now. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Christy. Just for clarification, if an incumbent failed to declare by 5 p.m. on August the 7th, could he or she then declare in the period between the 7th and the 12th?
No, it's a hard and fast deadline for incumbents. The 5-day extension is for non-incumbents.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Thank you. Comments by the board? Comments by the public, please? Anything?
Okay, we do have one hand. Fred?
Thank you. Actually, my hand was raised in going back to Director Quinn's question about the treated lumber. I didn't get you didn't notice my hand was up. Pressure treated lumber treated lumber is not a lumber that actually has been treated with like paint. It's actually put in a pressurized chamber and they add a chemical called alkaline copper quat, and it's actually it's absorbed by the wood to make it not dissolve. So treated lumber is not because it's been painted or stained. It's a process in the actual design and manufacture of the lumber that makes it different than typical lumber that you normally buy at Home Depot.
Sure.
And you can buy this treated lumber at Home Depot as well.
Of course, yeah. No, I understand that, Fred. But I early on in the new regime on the transfer station, I brought in a few small pieces of painted wood or stained wood, and I was told that, oh no, that's got to go over here because that's treated lumber, treated wood. And it certainly wasn't pressure treated or anything like that. It was just had some stain on it. So yeah, we look forward to hearing what Dave finds out from county, I guess. Okay, moving on to board comments. Director Barron, anything?
I have none.
Director Carlin,
I have none either.
Director Hahn.
Yes, Mr. Vice President, thank you. I see on the future agenda items, item B, sewer rate studies, sewer system rate study. And I'd like to straw poll or nudge my fellow board members here in this regard. Months ago, we talked about raising sewer rates, and it was important. That was our next biggest priority for the sustainability of all of our accounts. And we've put it off because of COVID. And now it appears that we're going to be in our foxholes longer than we might have thought back then. And while I was an advocate months ago to say, hey, let's not try to do a rate increase while we're in our foxholes from COVID-19, I'm going to change my stance on that, and because it's urgent that we sustainably fund the sewer rate, the sewer plant. So I hope I wonder how my fellow board members feel about nudging this issue forward. We maybe can take extra effort to notify the public that we'll vote on this. But let's keep getting business done that's necessary, despite the reclusiveness of this spreading virus. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Greg. And I have no comments. Next item is staff reports, department head reports, finance report. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Vice President Quinn. The reports you have before you are the financial activity reports for period 11 or May 2020. I do not have anything significant to point out, but I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Jane, any comments?
No.
Jay?
I do not. Thank you.
Gregory?
None.
And none from moi. So, very good work. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Second is the Public Works report. Mr. What's your name again? Van Wagoner.
Thank you, Vice President, members of the board. You have my report for Public Works for the previous month for June, and I stand for any questions you might have about any issues.
Board? Just as a sort of a general question, with all the emphasis that has been put on the transfer station, I know that's kind of trailing off now because most of the work is not done, but have there been any important areas within Public Works that have had to take a back seat that we're all regretting now that we did, or has the weather been good enough and the good Lord been with us enough that we haven't really been hurt by this re-emphasis on the transfer station?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that were lacking. One of them was patching of our utility cuts and potholes and mowing. The roads has a pretty aggressive plan right now to get caught up with the patching. The mowing, kind of the saving grace. It's a two-sided coin here. Is our mower was down until just last week. It had been down all spring, so we weren't able to mow anyway. So that was a saving grace of not having anybody available for mowing. We didn't have a mower available for mowing. So we're probably behind the most on the mowing. because of that, but they're both up now, and we're hitting that pretty hard as well, trying to get caught up. So I think for the most part, we're doing pretty good with our schedule. And Rhodes was the crew that was mostly engaged in the transfer site. We did have some general services people during the normal work week that were out there. And so I think the mailbox renovation program had to kind of take the back seat for a little bit, but they're gearing back up. And in the next couple of weeks, they should be back on that schedule and hitting that pretty hard.
Okay. In looking at general services, what kind of a maintenance schedule? Do you have a formal maintenance plan on all this equipment that we've got? Is this, I know the stuff gets plenty of work for the most part, but are we doing preemptive maintenance, as it were, to make sure that we're not having equipment die on us at the least advantageous time?
You bet. As much as we can with the age of the equipment, and you'll notice that. And if you wanted, I could actually maybe have Larry, our general services supervisor, explain that a little bit better. But you can see the number 1 service and the number 2 service. The number 1 service is a basic oil change after so many miles or so many hours. The number 2 services get into brakes and into some other maintenance issues that while they have it in there for an oil change, they also check the brakes and the electrical systems and different things like that. So we do have those on a program with our new work order management program, PubWorks. And whenever those vehicles come up, based upon either hours or mileage, it will trip a maintenance report, and then Larry sends that out to the different divisions to say, hey, I need this equipment in. And then every Thursday, these guys get together and talk about equipment for projects and things. And then Larry also says, well, you can't have the backhoe next Thursday. We're doing an oil change or whatever, changing the brakes, whatever it might be. So yeah, they have a pretty good program for that.
Okay, so the plan from a couple of years ago is actually in motion. It's being done.
Yes.
Cool. Since it's a very public kind of a thing, are there any public comments on the Public Works Department?
Yes, we do. Jiva.
Hello, thank you. A few things with the mowing. Was that the mower that does the hillsides? And where are you going to be intending on mowing the sides of the roads?
Mr. Vice President, if I may, that is correct, Jiva. That mower, our bank mower, for lack of a better term for it, it's called a trackless, but that was the one that was down. So anything that we weren't able to just use a tractor that pulls a mower right behind it, the deck mower, we use the bank mower. I'm sorry, I don't have in front of me the road supervisor's schedule for where he's going to be mowing the banks down, but I know that the first priority is going to be the site distance problems at intersections and those kind of things. I'll see if I can't put that together and post that on the website and our Public Works page.
That would be cool.
Fiona?
Hi, we constantly, I often hear our aged equipment being talked about, heavy plant and equipment, diggers or whatever you call them. And they're very old. A lot of them, I believe, are from the very beginning of 50 years old. Are we at the stage yet where we have a plan to replace the stuff? Because it will give out eventually. I know the guys work really hard at not overstressing the equipment, and they're really good at fixing it, and this old equipment. Do we have a plan? Or we started formulating a plan, to put capital funds aside, because we'll have to replace it sooner or later, I think.
Mr. Vice President, we're formulating a plan. Of course, the funding needs to be part of that plan. And right now with roads, that's a little bit of a challenge, but we are putting together a plan as far as prioritization of which equipment is the most critical, and what do we look at replacing first? Do we do purchase? Do we do lease purchase options or just lease programs. And so we are looking at all that. We have been for several months now, trying to put all that together. And we're working with finance as well on those kind of strategies too to use.
You're keeping these old pieces of equipment alive with duct tape and baling wire, and in some ways, there's something to be said for just running it until the wheels fall off, because you're getting miles on it and it still does the work. Granted, if it can no longer be repaired because of unavailability of parts or something like that, that's a different issue altogether.
So that's what we're running into with the trackless mower, the bank mower, is it's so old that the manufacturers, we go to order parts, in some cases are having to fabricate parts because they just don't make them anymore. And so it's a one-off sort of fabrication.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, anything further from Public Works?
Fred?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the entire Public Works Department for the amount of work that went into the transfer station. It is going in. I think you guys have done a tremendous job. I think you guys do a lot with very little resources and a very tight budget. And I don't think you're recognized enough for the amount of work that you guys actually do and have to do in a very large community. So that was all I wanted to say, is kudos to all of you guys and your staff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Okay, next item. Sorry?
Here, second.
Here.
Good,
Yes.
thanks a lot.
Yeah, three cheers, the gang's all here. Next, Chief for Public Safety Report.
Greetings, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. You have my June 2020 Public Safety Report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anything from the board?
Well, okay. At the last meeting, Tim, I asked Damon about community policing and if what has happened nationally has any influence on your thinking about how to go forward in community policing.
I think I understand your question, Director Barron. Fortunately, I guess for the Bear Valley Police Department, this is really just thinking off the top of my head. We don't have a lot of the challenges that some of other police departments are facing right now. We just don't. Of course, we maintain, strict professionalism. I think that's where that if you just stay there, you'll be fine. Strict professionalism and discipline, doing the right thing. And I think we have a very good public outreach way of doing things in the Bear Valley Police Department. I think, I'm happy with that. I would say our community policing strategies are strong and ongoing. So again, fortunately, we don't have a lot of the issues that other police departments are facing right now, but just stay professional. I've spoken to the other chiefs in Kern County on weekly conference calls, and Kern County is just a little bit different. Several of the cities have reported small occurrences, and actually we've had one or two in Bear Valley, but it's just a little different than some of the larger cities they're facing.
Yes, I just wondered if there was anything that would modify or add to the police policy manual that exists currently.
Not really. There's a lot of discussion about use of force policies being reviewed, but when you really get into the nitty gritty, there's not a whole lot that can be changed. I mean, officers are held to pretty strict standards on use of force in California. We use Lexipol policies, and Lexipol policies are used by a ton of agencies all throughout the country, actually. And so no proposed revisions at this time, Director Barron.
Thank you. And a second question, and that is, there have been transfers into our prison from Los Angeles. And I understand that there is now an outbreak at the local prison. Is that correct? And how does that affect us in any way, other than stay away?
Yeah, I don't see how it affects us, Director Barron. I was looking at some of the stats for the prisons in Kern County, and they seem to, one or two prisons have like 2 cases, and then other prisons have over, many times that. The prison in Tehachapi, I don't see how that affects us at all. They're as careful in the prisons, and they take as many precautions to prevent the spread as anyone, and I don't see that going outside of the institution and into the public. So I don't see how that's an issue for us at all.
Okay, even though we have several residents who are employed by the prison.
Sure, and I'm just, I don't know exactly what the precautions are being taken by the state to run their prisons, but I have to believe that they're doing everything they can to protect their employees, using all the the distancing and the hand washing and the hand sanitizing and the use of masks. So I just don't see how they would. I don't see that as a major threat to the valley.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would wonder if you could actually have a social distancing in a maximum security prison as CCI is. That would be, to me, a little bit difficult, I think. But just an observation from somebody who doesn't want to go anywhere near a prison. Chief, one more question. I'm sure it's been answered sometime in the past, but I've forgotten what the answer is. Do all our officers have body cams?
Yes, they do.
They do. And dash cams?
No dash cams.
No dash cams. Okay. Okay. Anything further from the chief?
No, Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, go ahead. Something? Nothing?
No, I'm sorry. I thought you said, is there anything else? Sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
I was going to open it up to the public to see if there's any questions for you.
Okay.
We have one hand, Jiva.
Yes, I did have a couple of questions when I think you went to the next person when we were talking with Dave about the roads and stuff. And so my 2 questions were, one was regarding, I think the water leaks or not knowing the source on Rolling Oak into the condos, if there was any investigation and found out maybe what's causing that, or didn't know what the status was on that. And then my other one was, are we looking at using part-time workers for the transfer station? Because a lot of those people that are doing the job are highly trained to do other jobs that are more critical. And then that would save us, having part-time employees instead of full-time with the costly benefits and whatnot. So I'm wondering if that's being looked into. And as a note, the last 3 times I've been there, they're either talking or to each other or not looking or not engaged at all, just standing under the shade. So I don't know what we're to expect when we go in. Once I saw somebody as you entered and kind of observed what you might be bringing in. So I don't know what we're to expect there, if you can answer that. Thank you.
David, are you still on?
I am.
Okay. Can you, well, first of all, we'll thank the chief for his report, and we'll go back to Dave for a couple of responses.
Okay, I believe the first one was Rolling Oak by the condos. That has been that has been repaired and is complete. Complete. We're waiting for the water, the groundwater, to kind of dissipate, but we're fairly confident that we've solved that problem. And it was a mixture of three things. It was some irrigation sprinkler heads that were buried under the sod, maybe over the years or whatever, that were running and going into the ground, with a combination of groundwater. And also we did find a water leak further up the road that we just got repaired today. And we already, as all of that, the first two were fixed or addressed last week, and the water leak repaired today. And after that, we immediately saw the water beginning to recede, so to speak. So that's the deal on Rolling Oak. As far as, what was the next one? The transfer site. And the thought of part-time staff, we have talked about that. As far as the comment about we have highly trained people that could be used in other places, maybe for a little bit of clarification, 2 of those positions are brand new and don't necessarily have any training in any other district functions. They might have a little bit of experience in general construction or some of those kind of things, but not necessarily anything in district functions or municipal functions or construction. So that necessarily wasn't a consideration for us. If they were to be considered to be used anywhere else, they would have to be trained. As far as the staff talking to each other, we've drawn up a list of duties for each of the 3 shifts, and we're just kind of going through the motions to get up to speed with what those things are. And in some cases, and maybe in most, I'm hoping these people are talking about what needs to be done now. What do you see need to be done? I'm getting ready to head up to Greenways to pack bins. You need me to look for anything else happening there. So there's probably some of that going on, but we're continually monitoring that and obviously trying to improve that whole experience, that whole operation.
Okay, thank you, David. All right, moving on. General Counsel report, Mr. Davis.
No formal report this evening. Thank you, Vice President.
Thank you. General Manager report, Mr. Malanen.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board and public, a number of items I want to just keep you up to date on. And Ms. Folks mentioned about the Lake Quality Advisory Committee, and we did have a good meeting with them a week or 2 ago, and we've just received some additional information. So we are setting up a meeting with them to continue to work with them and do everything we can to help with lake quality. So that's encouraging, hopefully for everybody. The results from the closed circuit TV for our sewer system have come back, at least preliminarily, and Dave can embellish, but the upshot of that is the system is actually in pretty good shape. It is 50 years old, so there are some spots where, the pipe has changed, or there's a root that's intruded, or things along those lines. But in the whole, in terms of the assessment for our capital replacement plan, it's in pretty good shape. So, we'll take that report and look at, what does it mean for us to go through this amount of pipe if it needs replacement, as an example. So that was good news. Along those lines, the wastewater treatment plant permit is, as you know, in process. We've made our application. We've been working with the Regional Water Quality Control Board because they wish to move our test site for pH, and really simply from the contact chamber where we chlorinate, and from there it goes into our holding pond for, hopefully everybody's been out to the plant and know what we're talking about. And then from the pond, it goes out to the canyon. So we test it currently at both places, where it goes into the pond and where it comes out of the pond. But the one that matters in our permit has been where it goes in. They want to change it to where it comes out. And in the course of that pond, we have no control over what is occurring as a result of the environment and or the weather, et cetera. And so we are working to develop some response to them. Our permit is supposed to be, moving through the process, but we want to address it, and it will probably get into some level of a compliance schedule with the board in the permit is what we hope. So we did engage the engineering firm MKN, who had done the application for the permit in the first place, and they've assisted us in working through these kinds of issues, because there are obvious technical, biological, regulatory issues. So we're progressing on that is my point, but to bring you a little more up to speed and be available to answer any questions you may have about that. Real quickly, there was questions about the transfer station. And FYI, I've asked Dave to put together all the materials, and we'll have a debriefing to hopefully assess how it all went, because every big project has its pros and its cons, its pluses and minuses, and hopefully things you can learn to do better the next time or to avoid the next time, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll maybe be getting some answers to some questions you may have about, what didn't get done. I think Dave kind of answered that, but those are legit kinds of questions as we've put our resources into that one project. Some other things didn't happen. We can talk about that in this debriefing and be able to identify then for future efforts what we may not want to do next time, if that's a lesson learned, if that makes sense to you. The county had ordered, we finished up, they ordered the pneumatic tank generators. So those are in play. You've just finished the rest for our mobile and a couple of fixed. Our next step for those pneumatics will be getting some of the specs, and we'll need to put some pads out at those 7 pneumatic sites. We still, I think, have to go get one more. I have not heard from the county that the savings they may have generated might pay for our 7th, so we may have to do that on our own. We've continued to work with the association on the concept and notion, Chief Melanson and I, and General Manager Schreck, who has been very helpful and again cooperative. The project hopefully will get cooking next year. We're going to keep at our end moving forward with Gatehouse Solutions. The way it can work will be, it could serve as an amenity card for the association and as a card to get you through the gate. So that's actually kind of exciting. What it would do is eliminate all those windshield stickers and other kinds of transferable access. So we keep limiting how you can get in here as an improvement on security. And if I might, Mr. Vice President, members of the board, I would like to kind of piggyback on a little bit on Director Hahn's comment, and it's in the vein of the sewer report and where we're at. And
Bill, you're muted. There you go.
now, tell me I just got muted and I wasn't muted for the last 10 minutes.
You were good. You were good. You were good.
Okay.
We heard you.
Starting to talk about the sewer report.
Yeah, and maybe somebody muted me. So I wanted to just touch in there and leave my hands. Maybe they were moving too much. That, we've kind of taken the position that we weren't going to put it on the agenda, at least from a GM position. Not going to put it on until we can get everybody in the room. And, that I think is in response to the, I'll say, outpouring from the public with their opinion about what the district and the board should or should not do, mostly about option 2. So a little bit maybe of I'm going to follow up with Greg's question about, we're now 4 months down the line. I don't think expected that. And I'm not sure that I would put an estimate on how much farther it's going to be so we can all get in the room together. So I do think we need to think about moving the sewer report onto an agenda, even if it's a Zoom meeting. And just because every month that goes by, Hamid can tell you the number, but it's probably $25,000 or $30,000 a month. I'm, something of that magnitude, I think. And so I think it's important to move on, and wanted to get some feedback, direction from you about that, so that we might package something up if it's the intent to do so by September. That was my last comment, Vice President.
Speaking for myself, I agree with you and with Greg that this could go on indefinitely. And, if we are not too tied up about our willingness to listen to public comments, I see no problem at all with having it in a remote meeting, in a Zoom meeting, and invite everybody to attend. But most of the basic work is now done, as far as I can tell. And of course, we've lost 4 months too. But I would say let's get it on an agenda as quickly as possible.
So if I might, just to comment, the addendum, the intent is I've worked up an addendum. I would say it's not completed, but it's fairly far along. And the intent is that would be presented to you in response to the direction from March meeting. And along with that would be, what are the implications? I think we went through them generally with that PowerPoint that we used for the presentation. But I think the impacts and so on for both the sewer fund and the general fund, those are the kinds of issues for that option 2 that we would put into that report for you. And the intent would be, okay, now you have the report with whatever options and you move forward. So that's a little bit of the background.
Yeah. Jane, anything?
No.
And Jay?
I would agree. Let's put it on the agenda for September.
If we can make it.
Well,
Greg?
I think we should be able to.
Okay, cool. All right. Greg, anything else?
Nothing to add. Let's get her done.
Cool. Okay.
Well, let me just, and I know this is prodding a little bit more, but it may have some possible impact on folks. And I would admit I've recognized the level of opposition to option 2 from our community. It's been troublesome to me because the issue has created such divisiveness in Bear Valley, and that's really unfortunate. But it is how people feel, and so thinking about that probably factors into my thinking, and potentially then how we react to the public, but in advance of even a September meeting. The option number 2, I think the board has a pretty good understanding of it. One of the challenges we will probably be facing now that we weren't facing yesterday is the gate project put a I think a legitimate demand on the general fund versus the road fund, and now it's changed a little bit of these financials. And again, I don't think Hamid has had a chance to run them, but arguably, we have $1 million extra roughly in that fund, and we just took 25% of it out. And that freeboard for our fund, it begins to create another question and discussion for us that affects that sewer option 2, and whether moving forward with that is affected by some of these other actions, if that makes sense. And so I plant that out there for you, and if you can comment on that to the extent that creates a challenge for moving forward on option 2. And we know that the people may be less uproarious going into that September meeting.
We take
Can't say I've used uproarious before, but there you go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. General Manager. Anything from the public?
Were we wanting, Mr. Malinan, board comments on your statement?
Thank you. I certainly would appreciate any comments on it. Just we've got time to move forward. I think I have a consensus of working to do this in September, live or via Zoom. And in either case, we'll be prepared with the report. I'm just looking for if there has been any other thought in the interim 4 months since you gave us direction to prepare that addendum.
Well, I'll say that my enthusiasm for option 2 has rather faded in the sunlight. So if that's what you're looking for, that's where I stand right now.
Well, Mr. Quinn, thank you very much. I do appreciate that because it is helpful. It is helpful to know if the lay of the land is a little different than it was 4 months ago and or yesterday.
Yeah. Okay, anything further from the board?
I think I've been very vocal about not being fond of option 2, and if we're going to call it option 1, that's what I'm going to advocate for.
Thank you.
Jane, anything?
Same comments as Greg.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you, Jay.
I said I mirror the same comments as Greg.
Okay, cool. And Jane?
Nothing new.
Nothing new. Okay.
I appreciate it. Any other questions for me?
The public. Anything from the public?
And look at those hands.
Okay, we have Jiva.
Yes, thank you. And I meant to thank you earlier, all the people that are doing the work and the roads and water and everything. But thank you, Bill, for sharing what you just shared about that. So my understanding is you would still be presenting an addendum and the legal responses for that September meeting. And at that time, the choice would be made between option 1 and 2. So that was one thing. And then I'm still definitely, I know we still might be in this lockdown, but if there's any way, and we could meet at the Whiting Center and still have the spacing, it's such a big issue if that option 2 is going to remain an option. So I just wanted to let you know that was my feeling on that. But I really appreciate everyone looking into this, like you mentioned, Bill, and taking into account needing those funds for other places like the gate, and recently going down the backside of Deer Trail to the range. You can't, in some of those spots, you can't go around a corner without being in the other lane because it's just so unsafe. As you were, the discussion regarding guardrails, well, the roads are so bad that it is making an accident waiting to happen at times. So thank you for those considerations, because we really need those funds elsewhere. Thank you.
Ms. Vice President, if I might, because Jiva hit on something, and I think the first is whether or not there's an interest in moving forward with option 2 might have a bearing on a lot of this and the meeting. I think the Whiting Center option is good, with an exception, and that unfortunately is that we are all still under the directives to not be gathering. And with the more recent spiking and increases in cases, I don't see that necessarily changing in 60 days, unfortunately. So I feel, responsible in the sense of I understood that option 2 is a big item, and that's why I said we wouldn't deal with it via Zoom, but we'd look at the residents and get their input directly. However, a couple different things are changing so that we may not be able to do the face-to-face, and potentially, I guess is what I'm hearing, it may not be as significant an issue relative to option 2. Secondly, I've asked Mr. Van Wagner to develop a estimate for making Deer Trail passable. And I share that because something that Jiva said about Deer Trail back there and its condition. And our intent there is to at least have some magnitude of a cost that we and the community can understand for a alternate evacuation route. And the currently that isn't one. I think it's possible it could be, but I think its condition would have to change. And with perhaps some work on the engineering side, we may be able to go pursue some grant funds for it. But at least we'd know what it costs. Man, my hands did.
Okay, Fred?
Thank you, Christy. Quickly, I want to thank you for being very detailed in your report. It was very helpful. In regards to the sewer option 2, it sounds like 3 of the board members have kind of changed their opinion, or 2 have changed. 1 has kept the same opinion. I would say if you're going to put option 2 on the agenda for September, it may not hurt to have a public hearing prior to the September meeting regarding option 2. And option 2, when it was first presented in March, was supposed to have more vetting done to it in regards to the details.
Right.
I'm not aware that that has occurred. And if the board doesn't really want you to pursue option 2, I don't think it's necessary to waste the manpower to completely vet that, because now the numbers for Hamed have changed when you're pulling the 250,000 out of the general fund. All those numbers would have to be rerun, and I don't know if that's necessarily worth the manpower time to rerun if the board feels that option 2 isn't the direction they want to go.
Let me address that, Fred, and I appreciate that. There's a couple thoughts going through my head. A, the addendum work has been progressing, but I'm not also going to release, discuss, or review that with anybody before the board. So, we kind of have some of these technicalities that fence us in a little bit. So the direction I have from the board, which is the official direction via their vote, was to prepare that addendum. So we will do that, and we will bring it back. I do appreciate the sentiment that perhaps puts a color on how this might be perceived come that time. And it may, in fact, I may weigh in myself relative to giving advice or recommendations about the options that they'll have. So what my hope is that as people are aware of the change perhaps in situations and perspectives of the board, that we might be able to move forward with a Zoom meeting and not have it be a major issue.
Understood. My simple point, I'm not trying to get any details information. It was just, if that report has not been made public, a public meeting beforehand that addresses, here's what the option 2 actually lays out, may not be a bad thing. If you feel that it's more appropriate in the September meeting, fine. But
it may be better to have a clear direction from the board, because currently the only one I have is the one from March. What we're hearing is not a direction to me, but it is something that I and you and others are at least aware of. Now, if the board had another meeting, if they wanted to give me more explicit direction to not do something, fine. But otherwise, I think, we'd just kind of go with what I've been told to do, and maybe there's a little color from this meeting that can be added into it come September.
okay,
Or
so
before,
with the work that has been ongoing, all the numerics will be updated in that addendum sewer study 2 then for the September meeting.
Yeah, we'll have time to do that.
Okay.
I think Hamid's already working on it. I think he's muted, and yeah.
It's mainly just the general funds withdrawal, because that's actually what's going to change the long-term projections in the most part.
That is
Secondly, and again, this may be an internal, is again, where does Director Roberts sit in a conflict of interest with legal counsel in regards to this specific option 2? I don't see any conflict of interest with option 1, but in option 2, I'm not sure there isn't a conflict of interest in regards to this option 2.
If I might attempt, Mr. Vice President, to deal with that, and is Don, where's Don? I'm not seeing him.
I'm here, Bill.
Is this an appropriate time for you to weigh in?
Yeah, I was going to hold off, but as this keeps coming up, and I think when the item comes back, there will be a opinion from our office presented to the public. But since people keep weighing in on this, I will just preview the message, and that is that we've reviewed the situation, and under the state's conflict of interest laws, there is specific exemptions when a body is doing rate making. So, for example, all of our directors had potentially interests in the water rates because they pay for them. That's the same interest here for Director Roberts, and they all participated because they could, because there's an exemption for rate making, and that's going to apply here too. So it's our opinion that Director Roberts has no conflict of interest. His role with the condo association is simply a voluntary officer for association. He is not paid, so he has no financial interest arising from that. His interest is simply that of a property owner in the district. And again, we'll explain further, but I hope people will allow us the opportunity to present that. And people keep in mind too that the September board meeting is really to set a public hearing for actual action. It is not the action itself. So there will be, another opportunity before actual action takes place, although that's part of it, and we want to address that issue. But I would hope that people will, review that at the time, and we could discuss it further at the next meeting, because it's not agendized, but we were intending to publicly disclose that, but I've not had a chance to discuss this in detail with Director Roberts.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Direct Vice President Quinn, we have one more hand and then somebody who has raised their hand a second time. I don't know how long you want to let the comment period go on, but
That's okay. We're open-minded.
okay. Fiona?
Hello, everyone. We keep talking about option 1 and option 2, and I understand that Bill had direction on the option 2, but is it now time to think of a range of options rather than going, well, we've only got option 1 or we've only got option 1 or 2. Maybe we need different choices. Maybe one of the discussions that I have seen or heard or whatever has, for example, says, let's not bother with the screen, and that saves a great deal of money. And I know it would be more work for staff, but would the board perhaps consider saying to staff, look, if there are some interesting options that you could come up with, you know, maybe a list, okay, if we start at this level and this is all the work we do, this is how much it would cost the sewer users. And if we add in this, then the rate would have to be at this amount for the sewer users. And then if we added in this, and then maybe the sewer users would feel that they have some options there. They are going to have to pay more, you know, as time goes on, one way or another, but perhaps, you know, if it's more digestible chunks, or maybe there's a range of options and we could say, well, we'll pick A and D and E, but we don't want B and C, or something like that. Is there some way we can be more, you know, being sensitive to the sewer users? Are there other options that the board could say, hey, you know, general manager, can you look at these? Can you give us a range of ideas so we can perhaps make it more palatable for everyone?
Go ahead, Bill.
Mr. Vice President. And I'd already envisioned, it's a great question, Fiona, and already been thinking that. And, you know, relative to the option 2 and the magnitude of the dollars that were going from the general fund to the sewer fund, it was really, you're right, it's a bar screen and a SCADA system. So that leaves 4 options that I figured we would be presenting if the board then was going to go that way, which would be, you could leave it as is and we purchase both supported by rates, or you pick one or the other of the 2 items, or you don't pick either of them and you eliminate both of them from the rate supported CIP. So there are actually 4 already in my head to go down that path that I was going to have for the board. So thank you.
And is that going to be possible for Ahmed to get done by September?
Oh yeah, because those are just 2 chunks of money, if you will. And Hamid has, yeah, he'll have it done tomorrow.
He's already done.
Okay.
Jiva?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Bill, for all the updated information, and Hamid. And regarding legal, thank you, Don, for that bit of insight. But I still go back to the June 11th meeting when I submitted my letter with questions, especially regarding our policies and ethics and whatnot. And it said even a perception of something should not be allowed as far as the vote goes. So I'm hoping you're going to address all that in detail. And maybe Christy could provide that letter with my specific questions in there regarding our policies, our own policies, and a perception of.
Thank you. And again, we will address that when it's an agenda item. This was just a discussion.
Thank you.
And
No,
yes,
I appreciate it.
It's important to understand that. But again, I think when you read the exemption under state law and, you know, again, think about it further, no rates would ever be increased because every director has some kind of interest when, you know, they're voting on things that they pay for themselves. That's why this exemption exists. But you know, good things to discuss, and we will have that discussion for sure in September. And our analysis will be in the board package, and I'll revisit that and perhaps either expand on it in writing or at least orally to respond to your question, which is a good one.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item 13, future agenda items. Would you read the revised future agenda items, Christy?
We have approve the district personnel policy manual in September. The sewer system rate study, looks like that will go to September. And then the public hearing, that would have to be in November, right? Unless we have a special meeting.
Well, certainly TBA, right?
Yeah, 45 days.
Yep. And that's all I've got. Did we add anything else?
I have nothing.
Okay.
Okay, final comments?
A
There being
motion
no-
to adjourn.
There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Directors is September 10th, 2020. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.